Good evening. My name's Patty and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Patty.
Hello. Welcome, all 179 of you. 180. Thank you so much for showing up and supporting this group. And thank you for the invite. I live here with my husband in Corrales, New Mexico. I'm originally from the Pueblo of Jemez, and my mom was from the Pueblo. My dad's half Dene, so I have two native lineage that I grew up with. And I come from a family of 11. My mother passed when she was 40, so she was pretty young when she passed. But I'm not here to tell you too much about who I am, but what I want to share is what I am, and that's an alcoholic. I come to Alcoholics Anonymous because I have a desire to stay sober today, and I don't want to drink alcohol. My sobriety date is April 3rd, 1982, and that's only through the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and a plan of recovery that's written in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that I'm sober today, and great sponsorship. I wasn't the greatest sponsee, but it was slowly that I started learning how to take some discipline and direction from my sponsors. And I'm grateful to all of them, even my current sponsor. I just want to share that I didn't realize that I was different from anyone that I hung out with that were drinking alcohol. My intention was to go and have a good time. Good intentions never ended up to the best. Once I took that first drink, I was on the roll and didn't realize for many years that I couldn't drink alcohol successfully. I always ended up in dark places, ended up places where I knew I wouldn't do if I was sober or not drinking. I drank hard. I loved the bars, even though I wasn't of age to be in a bar. There was always someone older than me that would, usually a man, that I was able to get into the bars being at such a young age. But so I had a child when I was pretty young, and my son lost his father when he was like 4 years old. And he was half Native and half Black, looked Black. And when he passed away, that gave me a great reason to drink more. So I loved the bars. I was of age, I believe then. No, I wasn't. But I found that I loved the bars. And I was always looking for that Black person to replace my son's father. And it didn't work. Again, I found myself in places that weren't very woman-like. And I'm grateful today to have that past, because that's my greatest asset that I can share with another alcoholic, that I survived those days. And it was something larger than me that was helping me through those moments of delusion, sickness, and just not understanding anything about my disease of alcoholism until I opened the book of AA, the big book, and started reading what my problem was and how alcohol affected me when I took that first drink, and the mental obsession that happens before I take that drink. My mind, it tells me in the book also that I suffer from a mental illness of the mind and body. So once I sobered up, it seemed like it was the easy part for me. but it was having to deal with my mind in telling me that you can't do this. You don't belong here. You're not going to have any more fun. But the fellowship of the members of AA, or that those people that decided to show up to AA and decided to stay at every meeting, I'm grateful to them. What happened was, I'll tell you what happened, or what it used to be like, what happened and what it's like today, and told you a little bit of what it was like. I know we all have our stories of what alcohol did to us, and I'll tell you, it wasn't a pretty place for me to be. And didn't even know that it wasn't a pretty place. My mind was just telling me I was having a good time. What happened was, during April Fool's, I was expecting this big check. I believe it's from firefighting. I used to firefight with the Jemez District Forest Service here in New Mexico, and got to travel to California. And I knew that I was going to get a large amount of money. So I had a big plan that I was going to have a party at my house, invited friends, cousins. And the only thing is, I didn't drive, and my family didn't have any transportation. Are you guys hearing an echo?
Okay. Let you get off.
Is that I ended up having to hitchhike south to the next town to go to the bar. And I was hitchhiking with a cousin of mine. And some vehicle was driving north and we were going south. So they picked us up, did our run. They were driving us back to the village. And they made a comment, well, let's just go cruise around and have a good time. And forgetting in an instant what my plan was. So I said yes to these guys, and there we were driving around, drinking our beer, Bacardi, and it got really loaded. We ended up in the next pueblo, because the drivers that were cruising us around, they were from that village. And we were driving out of the village, and at the intersection, we were hit head on with one of those big rig truckers that was carrying lumber. And those guys left me and my cousin in the back seat, and they took off. Next thing I knew, I was laying in the hospital, lights over me, and in a lot of pain, crying, feeling sorry for myself, wondering what the heck. I just didn't want to die. So I suffered in self-pity for a few hours, few days, cried my heart out. And it's amazing to me that this experience happened. Thoughts came to my mind. My Creator didn't put me on this earth to live the way that I was living. And so I grew up very religiously, my parents' choice as a young girl. And I knew how to pray. So I said a prayer. It didn't matter what I believed. I just needed to pray and ask for help, because I didn't want to drink anymore, because I knew that my drinking had put me in that situation in the hospital. And I was just crying, feeling sorry for myself. My son was 8 years old at the time. And another thought came to me, where have I been for my son? So that was what happened. I left the hospital, went back to our home. Come to find out, my two older brothers were not drinking at the time, and they had a friend from Albuquerque come up to Jemez, and those three carried the message to me and said, let's go to the meeting. So I didn't know that we had AA in our community. They took me to my first meeting in our pueblo, our homeland, and didn't know anything about AA, why I was there. But people were gathered there having a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the only thing that I needed to know for that day and the rest of the days that I didn't drink was that I didn't want to drink alcohol. Not these words of sobriety, words of alcoholism, never heard of those words before. So those members that were in my first home group saved my life, and my two older brothers and their friend that showed up that evening for the AA meeting. So I kept showing up 2 days a week, sitting for an hour. Don't talk to me, don't look at me, don't ask me to read. I was so afraid to be there, but I didn't want to drink. To me, that's going to any lengths, not understanding. And if anyone's new here tonight, thank you for being here and for allowing us to walk with you through a day of sobriety, and to know that you don't have to be alone in walking this road of recovery. So since I walked into that room of AA, I have not found it necessary to go back out and take a drink. Life still happened. Lost my brother at 3 years in not drinking. And I just didn't drink, and I went to AA. There wasn't a lot of women in AA at the time, not in my first home group, but I kept going back and hearing all this language of the heart. I found out later is that these individuals had a desire to stay sober, so they kept showing up to that home group meeting of mine, which I found out later it was my home group. So my two older brothers were great examples for me. I saw how active they were in the group. They showed up early, they stayed late, they helped clean up. That wasn't the way that I was when I was drinking. I could care less about anything or anybody. But them not drinking, I learned that that's how important their sobriety was to them, to participate in the home group. So I watched, I listened, and I started slowly getting out of my shell and helping out. You know, they close with a prayer in the beginning of the meeting, they close at the end with a prayer. And that always carried me to the next meeting. I don't know how I made it through the weekend sometime. The spiritual experience was that I had to ask for help. It didn't matter what I believed or didn't believe, you know. There's a paragraph that I'd like to read now that I'm talking about. It's on page 46 of the big book. And when I was working with my recent sponsor, this just really opened my heart and my mind to know that how I believe today is my business. And if anybody wants to know, this is how it tells me right here. Last paragraph. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlined the totality of themes, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. To us, the realm of the spirit is broad, roomy, and all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. And, you know, I struggled with that part of step 3. Really believing, not believing. But what I did see in the walls of AA was the Serenity prayer. And that's all I needed to know, that it was a prayer. I memorized it. They recited it every meeting. And over the years, I've learned that it really has a strong message for me still today, is to accept a lot of things in my life that I don't agree with or agree with anything that's happening in my daily life today. Courage. I get courage from you people that keep coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I ask for courage from Creator because I need that direction every day. Courage to change. I think for me, the 4th step helped me with that. I didn't realize how resentful I was until I started writing down that first column of resentments. And, you know, I've done a few 4th steps, but that very first one was as good as it could be. I'm grateful for the sponsorship that I've had over the years. My first sponsor, she didn't waste her time on me, I know that. And the beautiful thing about that was there wasn't a lot of women, like I mentioned earlier in AA when I came in, is that we had visitors from Rio Rancho come and visit us, a group from the VA hospital that would come visit us. And this couple showed up. They had just moved to Rio Rancho from New Jersey, and it was a man and a woman. And I thought, okay, she's going to be my sponsor. Whatever that meant, I didn't know. She was my sponsor until her husband passed or became really sick, and I had to make a decision that I needed to find someone else because she needed to be with her husband. But that relationship with her was a gift, I guess I could say, because her and her husband, they love to go camping. And I don't recall how many years I had been sober, maybe months, but her and her husband were going camping one weekend, and they had asked me to house sit for them. They gave me the key to their house. And I could not believe that. They trusted me to live in their home while they were gone and to be in that beautiful home. Never experienced anything like that before. Because we grew up poor, you know, and it was just a beautiful relationship. Then I found another sponsor, Joe Rogers, who just was so involved in service that there was no way getting out of not being in service. She took me to my first Southwest Regional Conference in Amarillo. And, you know, just so much to learn in Alcoholics Anonymous, not only from the big book of AA, but service as a whole. And she taught me that I'm still sick. I was complaining to her one day about my boss not looking at me anymore to do the projects that she was asking all these new employees to do. I was like, why is she not asking me? So into myself, right? And I couldn't shake it off. I kept praying about it, praying about it. Finally, I called my sponsor, Joe, and I said, can we meet for lunch? She came over and I told her, I was whining to her about my situation. And she says, you know what? Maybe it's just time for you to step aside and let the new people come in. I said, okay. And being with her, she always turned it into a different perspective for me. And we always ended up laughing at ourselves. That's why one alcoholic works with another alcoholic. They can understand me. I can understand them. And the perceptions can change so easily for me. So she was a great help in my recovery of growing up in AA and service, getting active. And she also taught me that if you're grateful, you better tell your feet, which meant stay busy, which I did. Got involved. She ended up getting really ill. Didn't have any family, and my husband and I took care of her when she was very sick. And it was strange because we invited her over for dinner one night, and we were getting ready. We were already done with dinner, and she just threw like $1,000 across the table to us, and she says, "Take care of my funeral arrangements." No. She knew she was ill, but she didn't want to tell anybody. Once we found out she was ill, she didn't last too long, and my husband and I took care of her funeral arrangements. We had a little ceremony for her here in the Native community. So we both, my husband Vince, is that we learned so much from her. Vince and I were married 15 years ago, and we met at a Native International Convention in Minneapolis. He's originally from New Mexico, also down the road. And we had to go all the way to Minneapolis to find each other. And it was only through Creator's doing that we are together today. And that's one of the things that Joe wrote in our card, our wedding card, is not to forget what brought us together. And that was Alcoholics Anonymous. So a lot has happened in my years of not drinking, my years of working the steps of AA, and allowing Creator to help me every day to be of service in whatever capacity that is. I don't know sometimes. And I'm grateful to be here tonight to share what it was like, what happened, what it's like today. I never would have guessed that my life would be the way it is today. A lot of step work has been done. I've had to grow up. Relationships with men hasn't been the greatest, but it's very self-centeredness in that category. It was my way or no way. And after doing a thorough 4-step with Joe Rogers, that's when things started to change for me, and started having better relationships with men in AA, respecting them as my brothers. And that's when I met Vince too, that year in 2004 at that conference. I'll tell you that's one thing that my husband shares is that, I guess my husband says, I guess we were having too much fun being single, so Creator put us together, because I certainly have had to work in this relationship. Again, self-centeredness, self-seeking. But there was one point in my marriage that, it doesn't come with a handbook. So I've had to learn how to act different today in the marriage, compromise, talk things out. And one day I just got so irritable and discontented that I was planning in my head, where am I going to go? Pack my bags. Where am I going to stay? I just didn't want, I was so irritable. So I left the house, got in my car, left the house, and I didn't get too far down the road, and I stopped, called Joe Rogers, complained, whining again at her about my problem. She listened, and she told me, you're going to turn around, go back to the house, go to your corner, which was my computer room, and you sit there until you let go of that irritable discontent and say a prayer. And when you're ready, you go back into the living room and give your husband a kiss and a hug, whether he deserves it or not. And I followed her direction. And I have not had that kind of incident anymore. This disease of alcoholism, even not drinking, can be fatal to me when I choose to stay in self, when I choose to not call my sponsor, when I choose to not open the book and read. It was only when I was suffering in silence that I chose to open the book. And anything that I read in the book helped me at some point. But it was just having to call my sponsor again and telling her the truth, what's really happening. So Joe Rogers passed away, and I met her sponsor, Lorraine. I knew she was in service quite a bit. And she was an elder. She was up there in age, and she lived in Farmington, which is a 3-hour drive. But it wasn't so much about problems, calling her with problems. It was about just acknowledging that we were both alcoholics, and I was more or less calling to see how she was doing. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about how she was doing. And we went to visit her in person a couple of times, and she just taught me so much about service, because I always saw her at one of the restaurants here in Albuquerque. She wasn't my sponsor then, but I would sit there and watch her when I go to that restaurant. She was always with another woman, working with another alcoholic. So had some good sponsors, and like I said earlier, I haven't been the best sponsee, but it's when I'm suffering that I'm willing to step up to the plate and say, okay, I need help. So I went back to school. I retired from my job of 28 years here at a community college in Albuquerque, and finished my schooling, got my dream job in the Pueblo where I'm from, and working with high school students in my community with my people. But there I go, back in my head again, because these women that I'm working with were from my community. And I was thinking, well, how come they're not training me? How come they're not doing this? They're doing that, all in my head. And I got so sick in my head, emotionally, spiritually. I reflect back today and I'm so grateful that I didn't drink. I went to meetings, but I didn't have a sponsor at the time. And I would come home and complain to my husband, complain to one of my co-workers who I was close with, just complaining about everything. So I couldn't stand it anymore, even though at lunchtime I drive up the road to go to the river and pray and cry and pray and go back to work and try to restart the day again. But in my head, I carried those people, I carried those thoughts to bed, wake up thinking about them because they weren't doing what I expected them to. Insanity. So I resigned from the position. What happened was I did my internship there at the department, and then I got my dream job, worked at that for almost maybe 3 months. Good pay. I resigned, came home, was irritable, discontent. And there's this woman that I used to see in our 6 o'clock meeting here in Corrales. And I had seen her around the AA community, different conferences and stuff, prior to seeing her here in Corrales. But I knew she was active in AA. I didn't really know her personally, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask her to sponsor me. Pray about it, pray about it. Finally, I made the phone call. I said, can we meet and have dinner? We met and had dinner and asked her to sponsor me. So grateful to her today. She saved my life. She saved my well-being and sobriety. I wasn't going to waste any time to sit and do nothing. I was willing to do the work. Again, the 12 steps. We read the book. I wrote, did my resentment list again, did my amends. That 6th and 7th for me is just really getting right with other people and getting right with doing what I don't want to do anymore. And that's to hurt people today. I don't want to do that anymore. So I've had to, again, get honest, tell the truth, pray throughout the day. This big book of Alcoholics Anonymous has saved my life. As one of our members say in my home group here in Corrales, is that Alcoholics Anonymous is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And this relationship that I have with Creator today is so freeing because another alcoholic in my home group in Jemez taught me how to pray in my language and pray for other people that are suffering with this disease of alcoholism. So I still have a home group here in Corrales. For me, that's important. I had to make my sobriety priority today, and that's to get to a meeting. I love morning meetings, so I do morning meetings. Staying Sober at Sunrise is our group here in Corrales. And to stay active with AA because I don't want to be in my head again for the rest of the day anyway, to give my mind a chance to talk me into a drink. I'm grateful to my husband for the sobriety that he has and how his program, how his experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is just as strong as I can imagine. So Thank you for being here this evening. I continue to work this program one day at a time because that's all I have is today. I look forward to this evening, and I hope that those of you that are new to Alcoholics Anonymous is that you just don't sit and wait too long to find you a sponsor. Don't sit and wait too long to find your home group. You know, get phone numbers from other women, get phone numbers from other men, men, women. Because like I said, this program has saved my life. So I'm grateful to the women that I've had the opportunity to sponsor and still sponsor today. And I'm grateful to my current sponsor for teaching me that I carry a message the way that I've been taught and what's written in this book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm going to end with this. It's on page 180 of the big book, Dr. Bob's Nightmare. I spend a great deal of time passing on what I learned to others who want and need it badly. I do it for 4 reasons. 1, a sense of duty. 2, it's a pleasure. 3, because in doing so, I am paying my debt to the man who took time to pass it on to me. 4, because every time I do, I take out a little more insurance for myself against the possible slip. I'm Patty Alcoholic. Thank you all for being here this evening.